We are in Dean Howell's gallery out in beautiful El Dorado, Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we're with artist Thom Ross. And Thom is, besides a fantastic artist, he is probably one of the most knowledgeable sources about the 1919 World Series of the Chicago White Sox that became the Chicago Black Sox. And he has in this gallery the whole historic storytelling of that World Series game, Chicago White Sox 1919 team, where 8 of the members were supposedly through the game.
Well, the interesting thing about the story is at that time in America there were 3 sports: baseball, boxing, and horse racing. They were all corrupt. They were corrupt long before the 1919 World Series. So what happens is we come out of World War I, where we beat the Hun, so America is on this very upbeat, positive thing. What happens in the first World Series after that? These guys tank it. So this is a loss of innocence for the country. A lot of the teams, of course, had lost their best players during World War I because they either went over Europe to fight or they had to take jobs in shipyards in part of the war effort. 3 pro ball players were actually killed in the war. So the owners realized that they cut the seasons back, and so by this they were losing money.
Yeah.
So during the World Series, they said, let's make it the best of 9. And Chicago, which was a powerhouse, and they had won the World Series in 1917, they were heavily favored to take the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds, their first appearance in the World Series. But as the day got closer, all of a sudden big money came in from New York betting on the Reds, and that's when everyone went, they started to smell a rat. And these are the 8 guys. Here's the team.
Here's the team.
And
yeah.
this is Chick Gamble, the first baseman, and he was the ringleader. He may have come up with the idea himself.
Of throwing the game?
Of throwing it all. And his good friend was the shortstop over here, Sweet Risberg. But together, they 8 of them got together because they needed hitters, pitchers, and fielders. And they got together and they said, we will take the gambler's money, which is kind of what they did. And of course, once they agreed to participate, what do you got to do? Go to the cops? They were had.
You probably would have got the same amount if they won the World Series.
Absolutely. Hap Felsch, the center fielder, who was the most candid of them all, he said we were a bunch of roundheads, which means we were stupid to do it. But he said all I ever got for throwing the World Series was $5,000, and I was kicked out of baseball. If we had won the World Series, I would have made $5,000. So it's a tragic story, which is more important as sort of a cautionary tale, a morality tale, and the classic tale of Faust, where you sell your soul to the devil, which is what they did, and this is why you can see all the money on the ceiling. This represents, that greed, that thing.
Yeah.
That none of these guys, probably by nature, were crooks. They were just goofballs who got greedy.
Made a bad decision.
And that was it.
So these are all watercolors, and it starts out with the team, and then it goes through the 8 players, including Shoeless Joe Jackson, who was made famous by Field of Dreams.
Well, he has, he's the most famous of them, but he has his own canon. When they made the musical Damn Yankees about the guy who sells his soul to the devil. Remember, the devil is Ray Walston. He comes up from his subway, from underneath with the thing onto the sidewalk. That is inspired by Shoeless Joe. Bernard Malamud, when he wrote the novel The Natural, in the movie, of course, in the guise of Robert Redford, of course, he hits the game-winning home run. It's not how the novel is. In the novel, Roy Hobbs, the Shoeless Joe character, takes the money, tries to return it, and because of the failing, he strikes out, and the novel ends with Roy standing in the rain, crying many bitter tears. So it's a much more serious interpretation of Joe Jackson. Then they came out with 8 Men Out, which was a historical approach to this thing, and then of course they all morphed into the legends that we see coming out of the cornfield, as Shoeless Joe being the now articulate spokesman for a man who can neither read nor write.
And you've arranged this gallery show very similar to the way that your book is. I read your book, which is a great book. The title of it is The Chicago Black Sox?
Right, the Black Sox.
Okay.
Because this is the centennial year. It happened 100 years ago this October.
And so these are the 8 individual players. These are all watercolors, and it goes into some of their personal life of the different players. And then we get over here and it introduces the Cincinnati Reds, which was the team that they were playing in 1919. Some of the back history on the Cincinnati Reds, and they had a good team too.
Oh, for sure. It was. I think the odds were more of an assumption of who should win.
Yeah.
And but this was the Reds' first World Series victory, and of course it's tainted. Did they really win it, or was it given to them? So that they don't even walk home jubilant. You know, they got it. One of the things is that when people saw the movie Field of Dreams, they all loved it. But then I say, well, do you know who those 8 guys were? And they don't. And the whole point of when W.P. Kinsella wrote the novel Shoeless Joe, he specifically picked these guys as symbolic of something. And once you know who they are, the next time you see the movie, you'll go, oh, now I get it. So.
And these guys were actually found innocent in the trial, just for the record. But there were, some of them admitted it, right? And
there were three of them gave confessions.
Yeah.
But nothing happened. The 1920 season was going along. The 1919 World Series was forgotten. They're all playing ball. And one of the gamblers, a guy named Billy Maharg, a boxer from Philadelphia, opened his mouth and started naming names. And haven't we seen that in the news recently?
Yeah.
You know? And so Comiskey realized that Gandil had left the team. But he had to pull these 7 other guys, and that was the end of his. He was well on the way to winning another pennant. It collapsed. They did some research, and in 1921 there was a trial in which the 8 men were exonerated.
And the story continues through this. Some of the actual playing of the series is here. The Cincinnati Reds, Chicago White Sox.
The 8 men realized they weren't being paid what they had promised. And so they decided to try to win it. They did. They came back and they won 2 games in a row. And before the 8th game, Lefty Williams, who was a fabulous pitcher, had already lost. He was one of the Black Sox, but he was going to go out and try to win it. Years later, his wife was talking to a young neighbor and said, but you know he was threatened. So it's very possible that we're not sure what she meant, but it could have been that he was threatened by gamblers, or they said, you lose this game, or we'll break your hands, or we'll kill your wife.
Yeah.
So this is, now you're playing in a whole different, so that's what this painting is about, is I have it, the symbol of the gunman, the guy who's reaching in the pocket saying, do you understand what we're talking about? And so these are the players now, they're full of remorse because they realize what they've done. The manager realizes, Kid Gleason, that he's been betrayed, so it's just this whole collapse.
Wow.
Hugh Fullerton starts to do research and starts finding out who knew what, where, when, this whole political thing that's, again. And when Joe Jackson went to give his confession, he was one of the 3 guys who actually said, yeah, we were crooked. When he came out, the legend has it, a little boy goes up to the great hitter and looking up with his doleful eyes says, say it ain't so, Joe. In some accounts, Joe is silent. In others, he says, I'm afraid it is. Joe Jackson always denied it, that it ever happened.
Right.
But whether it happened or not, this is the soul of America. The innocent people, the little boys, the little girls who looked up at their heroes and realized there's no Santa Claus. And this is this crushing symbol of just the heartbreak of what, because remember, this isn't murder. This isn't bank robbery.
Yeah.
This isn't extortion. This is betrayal. It's a real subtle crime.
Yeah.
And when you betray someone, you betray their faith, their heart. This is, I mean,
You betrayed your whole team and all the dreams of all these other players.
right, and you wind up, of course, betraying yourself.
Yeah. And then this
This was the trial. Comiskey got the best lawyers he could find. They were found not guilty, and they thought, well, we're back in business. And that's when the first commissioner of baseball, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, stepped in and said, regardless of the verdict of juries, you guys are out. So this is them being banished.
For life.
For life.
For life.
So baseball's on its way out. No one's going to pay money to go see a game when the gamblers have determined who's going to win it. Who comes along? Babe Ruth. And he starts hitting that ball out of the park. The sound of the ball hitting the bat, everyone comes flooding back. So he becomes the savior. He's this Moses. He's this. And
He became the hero that saved baseball
Yeah.
again, because everybody needs a hero.
That's right. And his game was the long ball. Up until then, it's what they call the small ball. Bases, a league leader in home runs might hit 8 or 9. This guy's hitting 40, 50, up to 60 in 1927, more than entire teams. So they had to let him beat baseball into a new form, which is the game we know today.
Wow.